I was standing by the casket, one hand resting gently on the polished oak, the other trembling slightly as I clutched the edge of my coat. The air in the chapel was thick with silence, the kind that settles after a long wail of grief. Henry Lane. My husband of 45 years, the man who once chased off a burglar with nothing but his badge and a broomstick, was lying still in front of me. I had lost him 2 days ago, and yet somehow this moment hurt more than hearing the flatline in the ICU. I wasn't ready for what came next. Thomas, our only child. Our golden boy strode past rows of mourners, his jaw clenched tight, his footsteps louder than they needed to be. He didn't look at me. He walked right up to the casket, adjusted Henry's tie, and murmured something under his breath. Then he turned around slowly, his eyes settling on me like spotlights in an interrogation room. "Don't you dare cry," he said, his voice low but cutting like a knife across the velvet silence. People started shifting in their seats, a few gasps. Someone dropped a hymn book. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. My eyes, already raw from days without sleep, met his. There was no warmth, only accusation. "You have the nerve to show your face here after what you did." My mouth parted to speak, but I never got the chance. Thomas raised his hand, and in one motion so swift I barely registered it, he slapped me. Hard. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. The right side of my face stung. It wasn't the pain. It was the shame. The confusion. The horror of a grown man, my son, striking his own mother in front of God, family, and friends. Gasps turned into a wave of murmurs. Gloria, my oldest friend, sprang from the front pew and rushed to my side, gripping my elbow like I might collapse. "Get her out of here," Thomas barked, to no one in particular. "She doesn't belong here. She's the reason Dad's gone." People stared in disbelief, some even getting up to intervene, but Thomas's wife Kelly was already beside him, lips pressed into a cold, triumphant line. She didn't look surprised. No, she looked satisfied. "Don't make a scene," Margaret Kelly said, almost sweetly. "It's really best if you leave now. This day should be about Henry, not your theatrics." I wanted to scream, to shout, to ask her what the hell she meant, what they were accusing me of. But I couldn't speak. My body moved without my mind. Gloria pulled me gently by the arm. My legs felt like blocks of cement as I was ushered out of the chapel. As the doors shut behind me, I realized the sky had darkened. It was 2 to 15 p.m., and the clouds over Savannah had gathered like mourners themselves, heavy with the weight of something unsaid. I stood on the steps of the church, dizzy, humiliated, cold, despite the thick southern humidity. I could still hear Henry's voice in my mind, steady, reassuring. "No matter what happens. Maggie, you remember this. People can take your money, your comfort, even your dignity. But don't you ever let them take your truth." Inside, the service continued without me. I was locked out of my own husband's farewell. We had been married 45 years. I had wiped his brow through flu seasons, bandaged his wounds after police standoffs, and stayed up for 3 nights straight when his partner died in the line of duty. I watched him fade into depression after retirement, watched Kelly fill our home with her fake kindness and essential oils, and her quiet undermining of everything I stood for. And now my son believed her. I walked. I don't know how long or how far. Just walked. Past oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, past brick sidewalks slick from morning drizzle, past the bakery Henry used to love, where the owner still kept a photo of us on the wall from our 30th anniversary. When I got home, well, the house I used to call home, my key didn't work. At first, I thought it was just stuck. But then I noticed the keypad had been changed. The keypad Henry had installed, so I wouldn't have to fumble with keys after my arthritis surgery. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. A few moments later, Kelly opened the door only halfway. She didn't even try to fake sympathy. "You've made things complicated, Margaret," she said, voice hushed like this was some civilized transaction. Thomas and I agreed. "It's better if you find somewhere else to stay while things settle." "Settle," I whispered. "I think a little space will be good. For everyone." I felt my heart pounding in my ears. Henry would never have locked me out of this house. Kelly tilted her head. Henry didn't always think clearly toward the end. That's part of the concern, isn't it? I blinked. Concern? What concern? Kelly looked over her shoulder, then stepped out onto the porch and shut the door behind her, lowering her voice like this was gossip, not eviction. He was confused, paranoid. He thought people were stealing from him. He said strange things about me, about you, about Poison Margaret. My breath caught. What? She leaned closer, her perfume too sweet, too thick. He accused you of putting something in his tea, said you were trying to make him forget things. I staggered back, my hand grabbing the porch railing. That's a lie, she smiled, a soft, patronizing smile. Of course it is, but Thomas believed it. And frankly, the hospice nurse mentioned some irregularities. Henry died suddenly. No long illness, no hospice. What nurse? You need to leave, Margaret, Kelly said. This is not good for your health, or ours. And just like that, she turned back inside and shut the door. I stood there until the porch light blinked on automatically. Then I turned and walked away. Somewhere deep in my gut, past the grief, past the sting on my cheek, past the pounding confusion, a fire sparked. It was small, weak, but it burned. Because I knew one thing for certain: Henry had trusted me, loved me, confided in me. And if there were lies being told, if my own son had been poisoned with them, then I was going to find out why. And I was going to find out what Kelly was hiding, even if it meant digging through the ruins of my own family to do it. I didn't go to a motel that night. Something about the idea of lying on stiff white sheets in a room that smelled like air freshener and regret made my skin crawl. I needed warmth, familiarity, a voice that wouldn't question me, wouldn't look at me like I was a ghost that didn't belong. So I called Gloria. She didn't ask why my voice cracked when I said hello. She just said, "Come over, now. I'll make you a pot of chamomile." That's what friends of 40 years do. Gloria Jenkins had been a nurse longer than I'd been a teacher. We met at a PTA meeting back when Thomas and her daughter were in kindergarten. She had the kind of laugh that made angry people smile, and the kind of house that always smelled like cinnamon and old wood. When I arrived, she didn't ask for details. Just took one look at my puffy eyes and the red mark still blooming on my cheek, and wrapped me in a hug that nearly broke me open. We sat at her kitchen table while the kettle whistled, and I told her everything. From the slap to the lock on the door to Kelly's insinuations about poisoning Henry. Gloria didn't interrupt, but I watched the lines around her mouth deepen. She was angry, really angry. "Maggie," she finally said, voice steady but low. "You remember last November when Henry called me at 3 a.m. asking what kind of sedatives he was on?" I froze. No, he never told me. Well, he did. Said he'd been feeling foggy, couldn't focus, was losing chunks of memory. Said Kelly told him it was just stress, but he didn't believe her. He said it didn't feel like stress. It felt like something was being done to him. My hands went cold. "And you didn't tell me?" "I tried. But you were so busy taking care of him, pills, meals, appointments, you brushed it off. I figured maybe he was just confused." I stared at the table. Guilt coiled in my stomach like a snake. "But now I wish I had pushed harder," Gloria whispered. Because a week after that call, he stopped answering. The kettle screamed. She stood, poured the water over the tea bags, her hands steady despite the storm rising in both of us. Then she turned, opened the drawer by her fridge, and pulled out a small manila envelope. "He gave me this in March," she said. "Said it was for you. Said to only give it to you if something felt wrong after he passed." My fingers shook as I opened the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper in Henry's familiar blocky handwriting. "Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're not safe in the house. Trust your instincts. Kelly's been giving me something." I stopped taking it last week and my head started to clear. I tried changing my will, but couldn't get the paperwork through Thomas without her noticing. "If I don't get another chance, check the cedar chest in the old cabin. You'll find the truth there. I love you. Please don't let them win." The paper blurred in front of my eyes. The old cabin. Henry and I had bought it in our 30s, a tiny place just outside of Tybee Island where we used to spend weekends before Thomas was born. After Thomas came along, it became storage, forgotten, abandoned. But Henry never sold it. He always called it our reset button. "Do you still have the key?" Gloria asked gently. I think so, I whispered. It's probably in the attic in my sewing box. In your house. I nodded. Then we're getting it back. She said it like we were going to war, and maybe we were. The next morning, just after sunrise, Gloria and I drove back to the house. I wore sunglasses and pulled my hair into a tight bun. We parked 3 houses down, waited until the garbage truck pulled onto the street, then slipped around the side fence like teenagers sneaking out. I had no idea if Kelly or Thomas were home, but I wasn't going to knock. The side window to the garage was still unlocked. I had asked Henry to fix the latch 3 years ago, and like most things, he never got around to it. I slid it open, hoisted myself inside with Gloria's help, and landed in the garage with a soft grunt. The house smelled the same lavender bleach and lemon furniture polish, but it didn't feel like home anymore. I moved fast. Up the back stairs across the hall to the attic door. It groaned as I pulled it down. Every creak of the floorboards felt like thunder. In the attic, the air was thick and dusty. I found the sewing box exactly where I left it, beneath an old quilt in a bin marked holiday decorations. The key was taped under the lining, a small brass thing with a green string still tied through the loop. I clutched it in my palm like it was gold. And then I heard it voices. Kelly, downstairs. She's not going to let this go, she was saying. Then Thomas's voice. We have the papers. No one's going to believe her. She has friends, Thomas. She's not as alone as you think. My heart stopped. Gloria was still outside. I bolted down the attic ladder, down the back stairs, out the garage, slamming the door shut behind me. We didn't say a word until we were back in Gloria's car. I got it, I panted. She didn't ask what, she just hit the gas. We drove straight to the cabin. But the moment we pulled up the gravel drive, I froze. The front door was wide open, and muddy footprints led inside. The muddy footprints weren't just fresh, they were wet. Whoever had broken into the cabin had either just left or was still inside. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribcage, loud enough I thought Gloria might hear it from across the passenger seat. She reached for the glove compartment, pulled out a rusted flashlight that probably hadn't worked in a decade, and held it like a weapon. I don't like this, she said. Me neither, I whispered. But we had come too far to stop now. The cabin had changed since I last saw it. The porch sagged vines crawled up one side of the railing, and the screen door swung open lazily with the wind. But inside it was exactly how I remembered: small, dark wood walls, one dusty sofa, the same floral curtains I sewed in 1987 still hanging crooked in the front window. But the footprints, they led past all that, straight down the hall toward the bedroom. I motioned for Gloria to stay behind. She shook her head, but didn't argue. I crept forward, each floorboard creaking under my weight like it wanted to betray me. My hands were clammy. I had nothing on me, no phone, no weapon, not even a keychain. I reached the door. It was half open. I pushed. Empty. No one inside. But someone had been here. The drawers were pulled out, the bed flipped, the cedar chest cracked open and rifled through. Gone. Whatever Henry had hidden, it wasn't there anymore. Damn it, I muttered. Maggie Gloria called from the hallway, voice tight. You need to see this. I followed her back to the main room. She pointed at the mantel. Sitting right there in plain view was a single black USB stick. Do you think? I nodded. Maybe they didn't find it. Or maybe they left it on purpose. We didn't touch anything else. We got back in the car and drove straight to David's office in downtown Savannah. David Miller. My sister's son was a 30-something attorney who usually handled things like wills and housing disputes, not whatever this was. But he was smart, honest, and didn't ask too many questions. We walked into his office looking like two women who'd seen ghosts. He raised an eyebrow. I was expecting a coffee meeting, not Mission Impossible. I handed him the USB. Please tell me you can open this. He plugged it into his laptop, frowning. It's encrypted. Gloria cursed under her breath. Of course it is. But wait, David said, typing. There's a folder marked Legal Backup with a PDF copy of a will. He opened it. His eyes widened. This is signed and notarized 3 months before Henry died. It names you, Margaret, as sole beneficiary of the estate. Thomas and Kelly aren't even mentioned. And here's the kicker. It lists the Savannah Police Officers Benevolent Fund as a secondary recipient. My breath caught. Henry had changed everything. He hadn't just suspected Kelly. He had acted on it. He'd tried to protect me. But that's not the version on file with the probate court. David continued. The one they submitted after his death is from a year ago, where everything goes to Thomas and Kelly jointly. So we have two conflicting wills, I said. Yes, and the newer one, this one looks legit. Signed, witnessed, dated, and digitally filed on a private server. So how did Kelly get the old one through court? Gloria asked. David leaned back, eyes narrowing. Either she didn't know this will existed, or she buried it. Illegally. My hands curled into fists. Can we take this to court? Yes, he said, but we'll need more. Testimony, evidence of coercion fraud. Anything that proves the first will was tampered with, or that Henry wasn't of sound mind when signing it. He was of sound mind, I said. He told Gloria. He tried to warn me. I have his letter. Then we start there, David said, and we follow the money trail. That night, I stayed in Gloria's guest room. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything Henry's blank stares those last few weeks. Thomas's sudden hostility, Kelly's fake sympathy, the key in the sewing box, the empty cedar chest, the USB. I didn't sleep. The next morning, David called. I pulled Henry's pharmacy records, he said. We have a problem. My stomach tightened. Someone filled prescriptions in Henry's name for lorazepam, clonazepam, and another high-dosage sedative, starting about 6 months before he died. But the orders were picked up by Kelly. That's criminal, I said. Only if we can prove Henry didn't authorize it. And there's more. Some of the refill slips are signed by Thomas. I went silent. My son. The little boy who used to cry when I kissed his scraped knees. The man who had grown into a stranger. He was in on it, or at the very least he looked the other way. I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling again, not from fear, from fury. Gloria found me in the kitchen halfway through my second cup of coffee, knuckles white on the mug. What now? She asked. We go to the pharmacy, I said. We get someone to talk. You think they will? I looked her dead in the eye. They better. Because if I don't stop this, Henry's death will be just another case buried under polite lies. And I won't let that happen. We drove to the CVS on Abercorn Street, where Henry had always gotten his prescriptions. I remembered the clerk, Amanda, mid-30s, always cheerful. She had liked Henry. When we asked to speak to her, she looked confused, then nervous. I really shouldn't say anything. Please, I said. My husband trusted you. I need to know the truth. She looked around, then leaned closer. Mrs. Lane, there was something strange. About 4 months before he passed, Henry came in and asked if he could see the refill history on his medications. When I printed it, he got quiet. Then he asked me why there were pickups he didn't remember making. I told him Kelly and Thomas had picked them up on his behalf. I swallowed hard. Amanda looked torn. He didn't say much, just looked scared. He never came back after that. I squeezed her hand. That's enough, thank you. As we walked out of the pharmacy, Gloria turned to me. We have everything we need to go to court. I shook my head. No, I said, not yet. Why? I stared at the sky, gray and heavy again, just like the day of the funeral. Because I need to look my son in the eye and ask him one question first. She didn't have to ask what the question was. And neither did I. Thomas agreed to meet me at Forsyth Park by the fountain where I used to bring him as a child. It was a calculated choice, public enough that he couldn't explode, familiar enough to unearth a part of him that might still remember who I was before Kelly's lies took hold. The sky was overcast air, heavy with the smell of rain and azaleas. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat on a damp bench, and waited. He came 5 minutes late. Same hurried walk, same pressed slacks, but there was a new tension in his shoulders. He looked like a man being hunted. Mom, he said, standing stiffly a few feet away. Said I told him? He hesitated, then obeyed. We didn't speak for a few seconds. Just stared at the water spouting behind the angel statue. I'm not here to argue, I began. I just want the truth. Thomas sighed. We already went through this, Dad. Stop. My voice cut sharper than I expected. No more rehearsed lines. Just one question. I turned to him, forcing eye contact. Did you know she was drugging your father? His lips parted, but nothing came out. His face twitched, jaw tight. Thomas. I didn't, he started, then exhaled. I didn't want to believe it. That was enough. I looked away, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. Then why didn't you stop it? He rubbed his face with both hands. Because I was tired, Mom. Tired of being in the middle. Tired of Dad's outbursts. Tired of the fighting between you and Kelly. She told me she was helping him sleep, that you were stressing him out. I stood. Don't you dare blame this on me. I'm not, he said quickly. I didn't know it was that bad. But you forged prescriptions, I said. Your name's on the refill slips. I didn't forge them, he snapped. I signed them because Kelly said it was just anxiety meds. She said he wouldn't take them otherwise. I didn't ask questions. I laughed bitter and low. No, you didn't ask questions. You watched your father spiral, and you let it happen. He stood too now, towering over me, but looking smaller than he ever had. I didn't want to lose everything, he shouted. You don't understand what it's like living paycheck to paycheck while watching your inheritance tied up in retirement accounts and that damn house. Kelly said we'd never get a cent if Dad gave it all to charity. She said you'd waste it on old lady causes and leave us nothing. I have a family to think about. There it was. The truth rotting and raw. I stepped closer. You let your father die slowly because you were afraid of not getting a bigger slice of the pie. He didn't deny it. I loved him, he whispered. I was scared. I shook my head. I'm taking it all to court. The will, the pharmacy records, Amanda's testimony, everything. His shoulders slumped. I figured. I could see it in his eyes, defeat mixed with a hint of relief. She's still lying to you, I added. She went through the cabin. She knew about the cedar chest. His head snapped up. What? She beat me there. The chest was emptied. But she missed the USB. His face paled. She told me you'd destroyed the documents months ago, he said quietly. I didn't even know they existed until last week. He sank onto the bench again, hands on his knees. She used me. Let's not pretend that makes you innocent. He didn't answer. I turned to leave. Mom, he called behind me. I stopped. If I testify, will you? I didn't let him finish. You want forgiveness, I said over my shoulder. It's not yours to ask yet. I walked away. Later that afternoon, I sat in David's office again. He had pulled together everything Henry's new will notarized and time-stamped, the pharmacy records, Amanda's statement. We now had enough to file a petition to invalidate the previous will based on fraud and coercion. There's a catch, David said. We need to file within 30 days of probate closure. That gives us 5 more days. File it tomorrow, he nodded. And one more thing, I said. I want Kelly served in person. David raised an eyebrow. You want drama? No, I said. I want her to see my face when she learned she lost. That night, I went home with Gloria again. We shared a pot of tea and she lit a lavender candle. We didn't speak much. We didn't have to. As I got up to leave the table, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. Same number. I answered. The voice on the other end was shaky. Mrs. Lane. Yes. My name is Dr. Peter Calhoun. I'm a forensic psychiatrist. I believe your husband was referred to me by Kelly Lane 2 months before his death. I gripped the counter. I never met him, the voice continued. But I found something troubling in my records, and I think you need to see it. Dr. Peter Calhoun's office sat on the second floor of a quiet building just off Oglethorpe Avenue, tucked between a closed florist and an old lawyer's firm. The kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Gloria insisted on coming with me. I didn't argue. After everything, I wasn't stepping into anything alone, not anymore. The waiting room was modest. A ticking wall clock, faded magazines, and the faint smell of peppermint oil. When Dr. Calhoun appeared, he looked younger than I expected, late 40s, neatly pressed shirt, a kind, cautious face that said he was used to hearing heavy things. Mrs. Lane, he greeted, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. I didn't want to say too much over the phone, but what I found, it's unusual. He led us into his office and gestured for us to sit. On his desk sat a manila folder and a slim black voice recorder. 2 months before your husband's death, Kelly Lane reached out to me. She said she was concerned about Henry's behavior, paranoia, confusion, mood swings. She requested an evaluation for early onset dementia. I blinked. He was 72, not exactly early onset. He nodded. Exactly. But here's the strange part, I never met your husband. The appointment was scheduled, but Kelly canceled it the day before. Claimed he'd gotten worse and was too agitated to leave the house. So he was never assessed, Gloria asked. No. But Kelly filled out a full behavioral history form on his behalf, signed it even. and she sent me a personal recording of Henry speaking meant to demonstrate his decline. That recording is why I contacted you. He pressed play. The voice was unmistakably Henry's, but distorted like he was drugged or barely awake. I don't remember, Margaret said. She says I'm fine, but Kelly thinks. Then a pause. Breathing. And suddenly a sharp voice in the background. Just say it, that she's hurting you. Henry's voice came again, flat and slurred. She's hurting me. Then the recording clicked off. My throat went dry. That's doctored. Dr. Calhoun nodded. It sounded suspicious to me. The pauses, the prompts. It didn't sit right. That's why I never used it to build a file. But here's the kicker. I found out a week ago that this same file, along with an unsigned draft psychological evaluation using my letterhead, was submitted to a probate hearing as part of Henry's competency claim. I went cold. They used it to justify the old will, or to cast doubt on any newer one he might have made. My hands balled into fists. So Kelly fabricated a mental decline, faked a diagnosis, and used your name to do it. I can submit a sworn statement verifying the audio's tampering and that I never authored any official assessment. That's exactly what we need, I said. But something didn't sit right. Kelly had played many roles in her scheme nurse, daughter-in-law, victim mastermind. But now she was venturing into felony territory, forging medical documents. That wasn't desperation, that was strategy. And strategy meant this wasn't over. As we stepped back into the sunlight outside the office, Gloria put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? No, I said, but I'm close. We had everything. The real will, the prescription records, Amanda's statement now, Dr. Calhoun's affidavit. David could file a motion to revoke probate and bring charges for fraud. I thought about going straight home, but something tugged at me. A hollow place in my gut, an unfinished thread. So I asked Gloria to drop me at Henry's grave. The cemetery was empty wind whistling between rows of stones. His headstone was simple Henry Lane, beloved husband, father officer. I crouched beside it, tracing my fingers over the letters. They tried to erase you, I whispered, but I found you again. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 30, but when I stood to leave, I saw a car pull up across the gravel lot. A sleek black sedan, too expensive, too quiet. And when the door opened, Kelly stepped out. She was dressed impeccably. Black skirt, silk blouse, heels that didn't match the terrain. Her lipstick was perfect. She didn't look surprised to see me. She didn't even flinch. I heard you've been busy, she said, walking slowly toward me. I could say the same, I replied. We stood on either side of Henry's grave like two actresses waiting for the final scene. I suppose you've dug up your little evidence, she said. Talked to the pharmacy, dug through the cabin, found your precious USB. And I suppose you've been watching me. She smiled. Not directly. Thomas has a loose mouth. My heart clenched. So you turned him into your spy. She shrugged. He turned himself. I just offered clarity. You drugged his father, Kelly. You destroyed a man's mind and tried to bury the truth with him. He was slipping already, she said casually. I just guided it. You faked medical documents, you committed fraud. She tilted her head. You think the court cares about a grieving daughter-in-law who made some clerical errors in a state of panic? They'll give me a fine and tell me not to do it again. Maybe. I stared at her disgust rising like bile. You think this is a game? No, she said, stepping closer. I think this is America. And in America, stories matter more than facts. And I've told a good one. Wife too old, too emotional. Husband confused. Son trying to hold the family together. You were the bitter old lady clinging to the past. She leaned in. And bitter women lose. Something in me snapped. I didn't lunge. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Check your phone, Kelly. She blinked. What? David just filed the lawsuit. Fraud, probate tampering, and Dr. Calhoun's testimony. It's already on record. Your story's over. She stared at me. Then she laughed, soft at first, then louder, more shrill. You think you've won? I don't have to win? I said. You just have to fall. And for the first time, her mask cracked. The car behind her started honking. A second figure appeared behind the wheel. I turned and walked away. But I didn't see her get back into the car. Because as I stepped into the road, my phone buzzed. A message from David. We have a bigger problem. A second witness just came forward, and it's not who you think. I sat in David's office, the hum of the air conditioner mixing with the static in my head. The text was still on my phone, glowing like a threat. A second witness just came forward, and it's not who you think. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fist into something and demand clarity. But instead, I folded my hands in my lap, held my breath, and waited. David came in holding a folder and a look I'd seen only once before when he told me Uncle Walter had died in a car crash. Calm, but grim, like he was carrying a burden he didn't want to give. "She's willing to testify," he said, placing the folder on the desk. "She signed an affidavit. And before you say anything, it's Kelly's mother." I blinked. Her mother, Carolyn Withers, lives in Decatur. They've been estranged for years. But apparently she reached out to me after catching a news bulletin about the case, said she recognized the name, your name. I was still frozen. Why would Kelly's mother come forward now? David sat down. Because she says this isn't the first time Kelly's done something like this, and Henry wasn't the first target. The room tilted slightly. She claims Kelly has a pattern. She attaches herself to older men with assets, isolates them from their family, then finds legal ways to take control. She did it in her 20s twice, but charges never stuck. And no one said anything. She was clever. Both men were single. One died. One ended up in assisted living with no memory of what happened. Kelly walked away with a settlement and a condo. I felt sick. And Thomas? David leaned forward. Carolyn says Kelly zeroed in on him the minute she learned about Henry's pension. She said, and I quote, "My daughter collects weakness like trophies." Gloria, who had been quiet until now, sucked in a breath. "My God," David nodded. "Carolyn's willing to testify that Kelly expressed intent to gain financial control of Henry's estate. And she says she warned Thomas." He ignored her. I stared out the window, my thoughts twisting. The funeral, the slap, the eviction, all of it wasn't a burst of grief. It was orchestrated, manufactured. Kelly had played a long game and my son had been her pawn. "What's her angle?" I asked. "Guilt, maybe? Or finally drawing a line?" She said she's been waiting years for someone to stop Kelly. "You're the first who actually fought back." Something inside me shifted. Not rage this time, resolve. We had enough. More than enough. The will, the pharmacy trail, Dr. Calhoun, Amanda, and now Kelly's own mother turning witness. It was time. That afternoon, David filed a motion for emergency probate revocation and criminal inquiry. The judge agreed to hear it within 72 hours. 3 days. 3 days until everything came to light. That night, I went back to my room at Gloria's. The lavender candle burned low, the tea was warm, but I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Henry, his hands, his voice, the way he used to squeeze my shoulder in the kitchen always just before saying something sarcastic. I wondered how long he'd known, how much fear he carried in silence. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke to Gloria shaking my arm. "There's someone downstairs," she whispered. "It's Thomas." My heart stuttered. I threw on a robe and walked down, not sure what I'd find. He stood in the doorway, soaked from rain, his hair a mess, face pale. He looked like a boy again. Not the man who slapped me, not the man who turned away, just my son, trembling. I don't know where else to go," he stammered. I didn't speak. I moved aside, let him in. He sat on the couch like he might shatter. "I left her," he said. Still, I said nothing. She tried to get me to sign over temporary power of attorney this morning. Said if the case went south, we needed a contingency. I asked why she needed that much control. She snapped. Said she'd make sure I ended up harmless, like my father. That word hit like a bullet. I realized then she was never going to stop. Not with me. Not with anyone. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "I was complicit, Mom. I know that. I let her convince me you were unstable, that Dad was senile. I didn't protect either of you. And I can't take that back." Tears slipped down his cheeks. "I'll testify. I'll say everything, under oath." I finally sat beside him. "Not because you want redemption," I said softly, "but because it's the truth." He nodded. The next morning, David added Thomas's sworn testimony to the file. The narrative had changed. The grieving widow wasn't just chasing ghosts. She had an army now. Her son, her niece, a doctor, a mother, a pharmacist, even a stranger with nothing left to lose. Kelly's lies were unraveling, but she wasn't going quietly. That evening, Gloria got a call from an unknown number. She put it on speaker, a voice muffled and mechanical. "If you testify, you'll regret it." No name, no trace. Just a threat. David reported it to the authorities, but we all knew it wouldn't trace back. Kelly was careful. Still, I wasn't afraid. She'd already taken so much: my home, my husband, my peace. She couldn't take my voice. That night, I laid out my funeral clothes on the bed, not for grief, but for battle. And I wrote Henry's name on a note card, placed it in my purse, and whispered, "We start in the morning." The person at the door wasn't Kelly. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't some ghost from the past. It was Thomas, again, but not the broken man from before. He was holding a folder. His clothes were dry, his eyes clear. I forgot something he said, something Dad would have wanted me to return. He handed me the folder. Inside were copies of old photos. Me and Henry dancing at our 25th anniversary. Thomas as a toddler asleep on his father's chest. A birthday card Henry had written but never mailed. And a small deed form. "To the beach cabin on Tybee Island." "I signed it back over to you," he said. "I never earned it." I didn't speak. I just nodded. "I've started therapy," he added quietly. "And I'm divorcing Kelly. Or rather, Kelly's already left the state." That didn't surprise me. She'll likely face charges, but that's out of my hands now. He stepped back, then paused. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But if you ever need help fixing the roof, driving somewhere, just call. You don't even have to say my name." I smiled, faint and tired. "One step at a time." He nodded, then dry trees. Just left. I closed the door. And with that, it truly ended. No more lawyers, no more secrets, no more grief poisoned by betrayal. Just the kind that softened over time. Weeks passed. Spring arrived in Savannah. I spent mornings walking along Forsyth Park, afternoons volunteering at the library's reading room. I even met Gloria for brunch every other Sunday. And one quiet Friday, I drove down to the Tybee Island cabin. Alone. I opened every window, let the sea air flood in. I pulled out Henry's old flannel still hanging on a hook, sat on the porch, and wrote him a letter. "Dear Henry, I did it. I stood up. I didn't run. And even when it hurt, I kept going. You'd be proud, I think. Maybe not of all my words, but of my fire. And I kept your memory safe. No one gets to rewrite the truth now. Not even our own son. The cabin's beautiful. Same breeze, same birdsong. I think I'll start painting again. Not because I'm sad, but because it feels good to create something out of what was broken. Love, always. Maggie." I folded the letter, placed it under his photo on the mantle, and then I sat back. And I breathed, for the first time in a long time, without fear, without grief, just peace. In the end, it wasn't the forged signatures or the stolen pills that hurt the most. It was silence. The silence of a son too afraid to ask questions. The silence of neighbors who saw the signs but stayed polite. And my own silence when I should have screamed long before the slap at the funeral. If I learned anything from this, it's that love doesn't mean obedience, and aging doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes the hardest fight isn't for justice. It's for the right to tell your story before someone else writes your ending. If your own child sided with someone who slowly destroyed your life, would you ever forgive them? Or is betrayal from family the one thing you can't unhear, unsee, or unlove? Let me know in the comments. Would you have taken Thomas back or slammed the door, Tori? Done too. I'm perched on the balcony of a weathered cabin staring at pine trees that swallow the horizon. 6 months ago, I fled the life I built. Tomorrow, my ex, Chloe, will wake in a cramped apartment to a knock from the sheriff. Lucas will find his prized pickup gone. My children, Leo and Mia, will finally learn I am not blind. They tucked my secrets away like gifts. They thought they fooled me for 2 years. Now I will show them what happens when trust is broken beyond repair. I never pictured myself here. I used to wear steel-toed boots and a hard hat. I spent my days crawling under buildings, saving clients from clogged lines and frozen valves. I hustled long hours so my family could live better than I did growing up. I believed in fair deals and firm handshakes. I believed my wife and brother shared those values. I believed my children were innocent. Each belief died the moment I discovered the conspiracy. At first, I blamed myself. At first, I doubted my instincts. By the end of that awful night, I resolved to reclaim my life no matter the cost. Detroit taught me how to fight back. I'm Ethan Rivera, 38 now, but once I was a skinny kid with scraped knees and 2 jobs by 15. My father drove a truck at night. My mother scrubbed office floors before dawn. Money vanished almost as soon as it arrived. Vacation meant sleeping in the car. By 16, I swept floors at a heating shop. Before I drove a dolly, I refilled coolant tanks and cleaned tools. I learned that respect had to be earned. I learned that loyalty demanded sacrifice. I learned every bolt and pipe was a promise. Each repair was a handshake you couldn't break. At 23, I passed my master technician exam. I borrowed $5,000 from my parents' modest savings and bought a single battered service van. Every spare hour, I chased new contracts and read manuals under a dim lamp. I hustled through snowstorms and summer heat. I answered phones at midnight and crawled on rooftops at dawn. By 28, I had 3 trucks, 10 employees, and a waiting list of clients. I poured every extra dollar into my reputation. I treated my staff like family. I taught them what my mentors taught me: integrity, grit, and pride in a job well done. I built something I thought nothing could shake. I met Chloe at a trade show in Seattle in 2018. She was 32, a sales rep for eco-friendly filters. Her bright eyes and quick wit drew me in. She asked smart questions about efficiency and safety. She laughed at my bad jokes. She challenged my ideas. We spent 2 days arguing over technical specs and coffee temperatures. By the end, I offered to drive her to dinner. We ate tacos under neon lights. She told me about her dreams of a calmer life. I told her about my empire in the making. We were perfect for each other, so I believed. 1 year later, we wed on a rainy June afternoon. I was proud to wear my best suit. She glowed in a simple ivory dress. Leo arrived 3 years later with my dark hair and her quick smile. Mia joined us in 2020, soft-spoken but fierce in her own way. Watching them grow gave me purpose beyond blueprints and invoices. I cut back to 50-hour weeks so I could teach them to fish and build snow forts. Chloe stayed home to guide their first words and steps. We looked like the portrait of success. Our revenue climbed past $2 million in 2021. We had built a tight crew and a trusted brand. That winter, my brother Lucas asked for a job. He was 34, restless after a string of failed ventures. I saw a chance to help family. He joined as operations manager. He signed contracts. He charmed clients. I handled design and service. He closed deals and I delivered. We celebrated every milestone together. Chloe toasted with champagne when we bought the 6-bedroom house. Everything felt perfectly aligned. Then odd things crept in. Tickets to luxury yoga workshops, new designer leggings, an extra truck billed to office expenses. Chloe insisted it was her self-care budget. Lucas said he wanted to surprise us with a performance bonus, calls at odd hours, a borrowed phone to take urgent client messages. Leo flinched when I walked into Chloe's home office. Mia avoided dinner or scrolled away when I tried to talk. Our bills started spiking. Hundreds of dollars disappeared on equipment I never saw. I brushed it off as stress and growth. I refused to see betrayal until it burned. I told myself we were unbreakable. I told myself family always sticks together. I doubled my work hours to keep control. I trusted my gut, but I also ignored it. I blamed my exhaustion on deadlines, not deception. Every time I sensed danger, I forced positivity. I hosted weekend retreats and backyard barbecues. I bought lavish gifts. I stashed my doubts like expensive tools in a shed. I saw warnings in my children's eyes, but refused to act. I convinced myself it was stress, not betrayal. Then came that night in October. Late calls sparked by Lucas and Chloe. Muffled laughter in the hallway. a secret text meant to vanish. I found the proof in a hidden folder on Chloe's tablet. My heart froze. My hands shook. I blinked against betrayal so deep it hurt more than physical pain. In that moment, I understood everything. I packed my desk at dawn, left a note on the fridge, "I'm done, and you'll never see me again," and drove until the road blurred my tears. I didn't leave out of spite. I left because I refused to be a fool. This was the price of my faith. This was the pivot point. When the sunrise brushed the pines with amber light, I wasn't the same man who'd slammed the door behind him that cold October dawn. I was sharper now, like a blade honed to a single purpose. I spent weeks parked on the edge of nowhere, mapping every twist of the road to my old life. I studied Chloe's patterns, Lucas's habits, the rhythm of my children's days. I listened to whispered rumors at a dusty gas station in Montana, where a retired detective named Maya Patel pointed me toward a hacker known only as Finch, a slender woman with bright blue hair and a talent for unearthing secrets. Finch didn't move without a plan. She insisted I prove my resolve. Over 3 icy nights in a cabin wired to her laptops, I bled out every detail. Bank records, office memos, Chloe's hidden credit cards, Lucas's offshore shell companies. Each file I handed her tightened the noose I planned to slip around their necks. Finch introduced me to Malik Navarro, a former accountant who'd turned whistleblower when he discovered his own firm laundering money for a shadowy syndicate. He owed me nothing, but with my connections, I offered him a deal protection in exchange for cleaning the numbers that would expose Lucas's embezzlement. Malik smiled like he hadn't dared hope for a second chance. He disappeared into my old office computers, erasing incriminating emails, forging false audit trails, and planting breadcrumbs for authorities to follow. Meanwhile, Finch dug deeper, tapping into Chloe's encrypted messages with her yoga instructor and a masked identity she used to funnel money overseas. With each revelation, my purpose solidified. I wasn't here for revenge alone. I was here to deliver justice. As the days shortened, I recruited Serena Vogel, an investigative journalist whose exposé on corporate corruption had made her a target in Chicago. She agreed to write the story only when I showed her the damning evidence Malik and Finch uncovered. Her steady voice and piercing questions would frame the narrative, make audiences see my family's betrayal not as a private feud, but as a cautionary tale about power and trust. Serena's presence reminded me of my mother's fierce kindness. She coaxed my story out of me, demanded clarity, forced me to refine my motives until they shone with purpose rather than bitterness. Next, I reached out to Diego Cortez, a union organizer I'd helped when he fought for better wages at the heating shop where I'd swept floors as a teenager. He still carried his old welding helmet and a hunger for justice. His crew mechanics, roofers, electricians all owed me favors. Diego assembled a team to stand at my side when the moment came, muscle to scare off any hired goons Lucas might send witnesses to ensure no one could silence the truth. Each ally filled a gap I couldn't have addressed alone. Night after night, I patched together our plan. Serena's article would go live the same morning the sheriff served Chloe with charges. Finch would live stream the evidence dumps so no court clerk could bury the files. Malik's forged audit would force Lucas's bank to freeze assets and alert federal investigators. Diego's team would secure the house, preventing any last-minute destruction of files or intimidation of witnesses. I traced every step back to the moment Chloe first concealed her second phone. I replayed her laughter when she told Lucas Dad's so tired he won't notice. My children's eyes at Christmas wide with excitement, unaware they were pawns. Those memories fueled my resolve better than any hate. Yet in those long hours, doubt crept in. Was I dragging my children into a war they never asked for? Could I expose Chloe without shattering everything they knew about family? Serena listened as I wrestled with these ghosts. She reminded me that truth once hidden corrodes from within. Better they felt pain now than a lifetime in a house built on lies. Diego's quiet nods confirmed we weren't bloodthirsty. We were guardians of a broken promise. One pre-dawn drive brought me back to the edge of our old neighborhood. I watched through binoculars as Lucas polished the chrome on his pickup, oblivious to the trap being set. I pictured Leo and Mia waking up not to a knock at our front door, but to the knowledge that their father had fought for them. I felt the old pride in every bolt of the pickup, every threaded pipe of my past, now repurposed into a fortress of truth. By the time the sun crested the horizon, our pieces were in place. Finch's server hummed with live feeds. Malik sent the final forensic spreadsheets. Serena's article glowed on her tablet, scheduled to publish at 8 a.m. Diego's men gathered in the shadows of the porch. I slid from the driver's seat, my reflection in the pickup's window, a man remade by betrayal and purpose. I checked my watch, 7:47 a.m. The countdown had begun. When the clock ticked 8, I felt the wind shift through the pines that guard my past, as if the forest itself bore witness to what was unfolding. And I sat in the cab of my truck, parked across from our old home, watching Sheriff Ramirez tread onto the porch with measured steps, while Chloe rose from the couch, clutching her yoga mat like a last shield she knew she couldn't raise. Finch's server hummed in my ear through the earpiece, its pale glow dancing across the dash as Serena's exposé loaded line by line on her tablet beside me. Lucas, oblivious, polished the chrome on his pickup with a ragged cloth he still believed in surprises. Ramirez paused, lifted the arrest warrant at eye level, and Chloe froze mid-breath, her defenses collapsing under the weight of that single sheet of paper. She reached instinctively for the mat, then let it drop as if it burned her fingertips. Lucas spun at the siren cry of Finch's live feed cutting through his frantic phone call, and I watched hidden transactions and shell company transfers flicker across the screen like spilled ink on white linen, each entry exposing the betrayal that had metastasized beneath our roof. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as Leo and Mia crept to the window, their small faces pressed to the glass eyes wide with fear and confusion. A silent thunder rolled through me, then knowing I had unleashed a tempest they would never forget. From the shadows around the porch, Diego's team emerged, two silent sentinels whose presence meant no hired thug could breach our circle. Behind them stood Malik, arms folded, the final audit spreadsheets still readable on Finch's handheld device. Serena's voice sliced through the tension as she cleared her throat and read the headline I had lived to see published: "The Fall of a Family Empire When Trust Becomes a Weapon." Finch's code had slipped past every clerk's desk, ensuring these files would be stamped into public record forever. Ramirez guided Chloe gently toward the patrol car, her tears carving quiet tracks down her cheeks, while Mia clutched a ragged fox toy, and Leo lingered at the doorframe, caught between hope and heartbreak. Lucas collapsed onto the doorstep, face buried in his hands, the rag slipping from his grip as if surrendering. I exhaled, stepped from the truck, and inhaled the sharp scent of pine and frost, remarkable reminders of every hardship my parents endured at dawn and dusk. I walked toward the house with the calm certainty of a man who'd pieced his world back together from ruin, my heart a steady drum of resolve. Finch and Malik fell in beside Diego, Serena holding her tablet up like a banner. We formed a silent line of justice that no family bond could dismantle. Chloe's eyes met mine through the haze of her tears, and I saw regret deeper than any canyon I had ever crossed. Lucas lifted his head, regret shimmering in his dark gaze. I glanced down at Leo and Mia, their young shoulders squared in unspoken solidarity, and realized the price of truth would echo in their memories far longer than any lie ever did. My voice broke the hush like the first crack of dawn. It ends here. Above us, a hawk cried its call, sharp as a promise. In the days to come, the neighborhood would murmur about the morning our family's castle of lies crumbled under its own weight. But here, amid the ruins, I stood unbowed. The storm had passed, and only raw earth remained beneath my boots, reminding me that from devastation, new life can spring. In the days that followed the collapse, the pines whispered secrets older than our pain, and I found myself walking a narrow ridge between justice and forgiveness. Each morning, I rose before dawn so I could watch mist lift like grief from the fields and remind myself that healing begins when we face the cold light. The sheriff's station became my second home as I signed affidavits and offered testimony that pieced together the patterns of betrayal. Ramirez met me in the coffee room and shared quiet solidarity as he passed me a steaming mug and spoke of his own lost brother. His voice was low and honest and taught me that mercy does not betray truth but can soften its hardest edges. In court, I watched Chloe stand in handcuffs and bear the weight of her shame with a dignity she once reserved for dinner parties. Lucas sat beside her in a tailored suit borrowed from the evidence room and refused to meet my gaze. I felt a stab of sorrow sharper than any anger as I realized how far we had all fallen. After hearings, I would drive my children to school through empty fields and force myself to speak of normal things. Leo asked about a math test, and Mia wondered if we could adopt another dog. Their simple questions reminded me that innocence carries its own wisdom. I watched their small faces and felt a sorrow strong enough to reshape my purpose. At home, I turned Chloe's old office into a study for Leo and Mia, filling shelves with their favorite books and leaving a space open for new beginnings. Each night, I lit candles on the porch and read them stories about heroes who endured loss and found strength in wounded hearts. Their eyes would grow heavy with sleep, and I would close the book with the soft satisfaction of a promise kept. Friends from the union brought meals and laughter and reminded us that community can rebuild what betrayal destroys. Diego arrived one afternoon with his wife and 3 kids and set up a backyard movie projector so we could watch old comedies under the stars. We laughed together until our sides ached and I felt the tension in my chest ease as if released by shared amusement. Serena's article continued to circulate stirring debates about family loyalty and corporate greed. I read comments from strangers who thanked me for my courage and from others who questioned my motives. Each reaction was a mirror reflecting back the complexity of truth. Finch sent coded updates about the case's progress and reminded me that justice moves at its own pace like a glacier carving stone. Malik worked behind the scenes to ensure the financial web unraveled without harming innocent employees. He once messaged me at midnight to say he had found an old ledger, showing how far Chloe's funds had traveled. His dedication felt like a gift you do not expect and seldom repay. Leo struggled with word choice at school when a classmate asked why his mother was in trouble. Mia pressed her face against my sleeve and whispered that she missed bedtime hugs from her mother. I held them close and promised them that love can survive even the deepest betrayals. I began talking to a counselor whose calm voice guided me through my own anger and fear. She taught me that forgiving Chloe did not mean forgetting her actions, but releasing their hold over my spirit. In her office, I learned that guilt can be a bridge to understanding when approached with kindness. One evening, I found a letter Chloe had written before her arrest tucked under the windshield wiper of my truck. Her handwriting trembled with regret and hope and spoke of a wish to mend what she had broken. Reading those words felt like finding an ember of warmth in winter's grip. I carried the letter inside and placed it in a cedar box alongside my father's tools and my mother's apron. It felt right to honor both the pain and the love that shaped my life. Months passed, and the legal case wound its way through hearings and mediation. Chloe agreed to restitution payments and a structured visitation plan for Leo and Mia. Lucas faced federal charges and began cooperating with investigators to save what dignity he had left. I watched each hearing from the front row bench, feeling the weight of history in every legal word. At home, I planted a small garden in the backyard, choosing heirloom seeds to symbolize the possibility of growth from broken soil. Each seed I pressed into moist earth felt like a silent vow that life endures. As green shoots emerged, I taught Leo and Mia to water them gently and watch them with patient hope. They learned that healing is an act of daily kindness rather than a single event. One afternoon, Mia asked if I still loved Chloe. I knelt beside her in the garden and held her hands. I told her that love can look different after betrayal, and that forgiving does not erase what happened. It simply frees us to choose our future. Leo built a tiny fence around the tomato plants and named each post after a family memory. When he finished, he stepped back and smiled as if he had repaired more than wood. Standing there, I felt the promise of something new taking root beneath the pines. The world beyond our yard still whispered doubts and judgments, but here in soil turned by our own hands, I sensed hope growing. In a few days, we planned to host a small gathering so Chloe could be with us under the sun and face the children with an honest heart. I feared tears and tension, but also dreamed of redemption blooming in unexpected places. As I closed my eyes that night, I pictured the garden alive with laughter and forgiveness. The forest around the cabin stood silent and still as if holding its breath. Sunlight curved around the pines as if the forest itself exhaled hope into the morning air. By the time Chloe's battered Subaru rattled up the drive, I stood at the edge of our little garden where tomato vines clung to their stakes like survivors of a long battle. Leo and Mia hovered behind me, their small shapes carved in the soft gold of dawn, and for a moment I felt the ancient pulse of the earth steady my racing heart. Chloe stepped out, her shoulders tight, as if she still carried handcuffs in their weight. And when our eyes met, she offered a shaky nod instead of the warm smile she once practiced in photos. No music played, no words tumbled from her lips. Instead, we all inhaled the hush of soil and sky, the kind of silence that only the woods know before a storm breaks. I held out a fist, and Leo bumped knuckles with me, then timidly reached for his mother's hand. Mia stayed close to Chloe's side, clutching the fox toy from Part 3 as if it contained all the magic she still believed in. I gestured toward the stakes of heirloom tomatoes heavy with green fruit. "Help me untie these," I said, voice low enough that only Chloe could hear. She slid forward, fingers trembling, and together we freed the vines. Each twist of the tie felt like undoing the knots of our past. Chloe's breath came faster with every snip, and when she released the final vine, she let her hand linger on my shoulder, tentative seeking. Behind us, Diego and Serena watched from the porch steps, their faces calm but alert guardians of the fragile truce we had summoned. We moved into the yard in a loose circle, Chloe with her knees bent to plant new marigold seedlings, me kneeling beside her, guiding her fingers deeper into the warm earth. Leo lining up smooth stones to border the garden bed, Mia scattering wildflower seeds like blessings. No one spoke of courtrooms or jail cells or lawsuits. Instead, we spoke of rain forecasts and how to protect tender shoots from late frosts. Chloe pointed out a patch of soil that slumped and confessed she'd been too afraid to tend to it alone. And in that moment, I heard the crack in her armor. I nodded and said, "We'll fix it together." The words floated soft between the pines. Later, we gathered around a makeshift table of 2 old doors set on sawhorses. Diego's crew had brought fresh bread, Serena had prepared a salad from root vegetables she'd foraged on her weekend trip, and Malik appeared with carafes of sweet tea he'd brewed from his grandmother's recipe. We passed dishes in a quiet line of reconciliation, each plate a small peace offering. Chloe placed her hand on the table, her knuckles white, and offered a blessing she'd composed in her own voice. To honesty, to sorrow that leads to healing, and to love that learns to forgive. Mia sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve, and Leo looked surprised that his mother could still sound brave under the weight of consequences. Between bites, Chloe told a story I'd never heard, how she first met Lucas after my back was turned at a company holiday party, how the thrill of secrecy had felt like a rush she'd mistaken for freedom, and how guilt had grown in her chest until it crowded out every other feeling. Her voice cracked over the last lines, but she held it together long enough to say she was sorry more times in that moment than she had in all the silence that followed her arrest. I watched Leo's eyes flicker. Then Mia reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried more weight than any courtroom verdict. After lunch, the children ran to the tire swing at the far end of the yard, while Chloe and I lingered by the screen door. I took her hands and felt their tremble. "You don't have to earn forgiveness overnight," I said. "Just keep showing up." She nodded, her tears glinting like dew on spider webs. In the distance, a raven cawed, its voice a stark reminder that life and death, betrayal and trust always walk hand in hand. I led her to a young oak sapling we'd planted last week and handed her a ribbon of green cloth. "Tie this here," I said, "for new beginnings." She wrapped the ribbon tight, and the ribbon fluttered in the breeze like a promise. As the sun dipped low, Serena snapped a photo of our patchwork family under the golden light, her camera catching Lucas in the background, offering a thumbs up to Diego's youngest daughter. None of us knew what tomorrow might bring: new challenges and court questions from neighbors. The slow work of rebuilding a fractured name, but in that fleeting glow, we tasted the truth that healing is 1,000 small acts stitched together by hands willing to hurt so they can heal. I gathered Chloe and the children in a loose embrace, arms circling soil and sorrow alike, and felt the pulse of the pines echo in my chest, steadfast, ancient, unafraid of storms. The forest around us exhaled again as dusk settled, and I understood that even the deepest wounds can sprout new life when tended with honesty and hope. Morning light filtered through the pines as I stepped onto the porch and felt the cool breeze carry the scent of fresh earth and possibility. Leo and Mia chased each other around the garden's edge, laughing as they flung handfuls of wildflower petals into the air. Chloe stood by the oak sapling we'd tied with its green ribbon, her hands folded in front of her like an offering. I watched them move, so alive, so unguarded, and realized that healing is not a finish line but a path that unfolds with each choice we make. We spent the morning untangling old ropes of habit. Over coffee at the reclaimed lumber table, Chloe and I sketched a plan to reopen the heating shop under a new name. Rivera & Compel Integrity and Transparency would be our cornerstone. Diego offered his garage as a temporary workspace. Malik agreed to manage finances, ensuring every transaction would be above board. Serena promised to document our journey in her next column, not as a sensational exposé, but as a guide to rebuilding trust. Even Lucas, from a distance, sent a note expressing remorse and asking how he might help the children without disrupting our fragile rhythm. I replied that forgiveness is a garden that needs tending, and that perhaps one day he could visit when the vines of trust grew strong enough to support him. By midday, we walked the trails behind the cabin, the children trailing sticks and stones like gifts. I told them stories of my father teaching me to drive nails straight, and of my mother's hands smoothing rough edges of wood. I asked Leo what honesty looked like to him now. He said it felt like the sun after a storm. Mia said it felt like her mother's voice when she finally said, "I'm sorry." Their words rippled through me and reminded me that truth can hurt, but it also lights the way forward. Back at the shop's old driveway, we cleared out rusted tools and swept decades of dust into piles. Diego's crew arrived with power washers and fresh paint. Chloe laid out safety protocols on a clipboard, her confidence blooming as she guided the volunteers. I tightened bolts on a service van that would bear our new logo, a rising sun framed by pines. As I stepped back to admire our work, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shop had always been my fortress. Now it would be our shared place of purpose. That evening, we invited neighbors for a ribbon-cutting ceremony beside the oak sapling. Leo handed out homemade lemonade, and Mia pinned fresh marigolds to everyone's shirts. Chloe stood beside me, her hand resting on my arm, and I looked into her eyes and saw not just guilt but resolve, and a spark of the woman I first fell in love with. When I sliced the ribbon, the scissors glinted under the lanterns strung between the pines. and a hush fell over the crowd before applause broke like rain. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness and justice can coexist, that love can survive the deepest cleavages when nourished by honesty and compassion. Later, as dusk settled, I tucked Leo and Mia into bed and whispered that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new chances. I stepped outside once more, the oak's ribbon fluttering against the darkening sky. A lone hawk traced a circle above the treetops, its cry echoing like a benediction. I closed my eyes and breathed in the forest's steady pulse. The path ahead was neither straight nor smooth, but it lay open before us, rooted in truth, guided by hope, and carried forward by hands willing to rebuild what was broken. In that sacred silence, I felt our fractured bonds knitting into something stronger, ready to face whatever storms might come together.